On a quiet farm in rural Montana, a gang of local thugs thought vandalizing an old storage shed would be an easy way to intimidate a stubborn landowner. They couldn't have been more wrong. What they didn't know was that Eleanor Mac McPherson had spent 25 years as a Marine Corps K-9 trainer in some of the world's most dangerous combat zones. And her 3 Belgian Malinois weren't just farm dogs. They were elite military-trained guardians with over 30 successful tactical operations between them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The October morning frost still clung to the grass as Eleanor McPherson conducted her daily perimeter check of Shadow Creek Farm, her boots leaving crisp impressions in the crystalline dew. Storm, Ranger, and Echo moved with military precision through the cornfields, their disciplined patrol pattern revealing years of specialized training. At 57, Mac's weathered face and silver-streaked hair might have suggested a typical farmer, but her sharp eyes constantly scanned her surroundings with the situational awareness that only comes from decades of combat experience. The farm's 300 acres sat at the edge of Blackwater County, where the fertile valley met the rugged foothills. Mac had chosen this location carefully after retiring from the Marines, isolated enough for privacy, but close enough to civilization, to maintain a successful organic produce operation. The morning sun cast long shadows through the remaining corn stalks as she approached her storage shed, where her prized antique tractor and specialized farming equipment resided. Storm, her lead dog, suddenly adjusted his patrol pattern, his behavior indicating a subtle change in the environment. Mac recognized the signal immediately. Someone had been here during the night. 25 years of training military working dogs had taught her to trust their instincts without hesitation. Ranger and Echo automatically shifted positions, creating a defensive perimeter as Mac examined the shed's padlock. Fresh scratch marks marred the metal, but the lock had held. Mac's lips curved in a slight smile. The reinforced security measures she'd installed hadn't been for show. Through the shed's window, she spotted her John Deere 4020, a meticulously restored piece of equipment that had been in her family for generations. More importantly, the shed housed the farm's irrigation control systems and seed storage, critical infrastructure for any agricultural operation. "Ms. McPherson!" The call came from Tommy Chen, her 19-year-old farmhand, jogging up from the direction of the main road. "Sheriff Patterson called. Says he needs to talk to you about the Henderson development proposal again." Mac nodded, keeping her expression neutral even as she noted how Storm tracked Tommy's approach, while Ranger and Echo maintained their surveillance of the broader area. The dog's training allowed them to differentiate between friendly and potentially hostile movements, while never dropping their guard. "Developers are persistent, I'll give them that," Mac replied, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone used to commanding in high-pressure situations. The Henderson Group had been pressuring local farmers to sell their land for a planned luxury resort development. Most had already given in to the increasingly aggressive tactics, but Mac had no intention of surrendering her piece of Montana's heritage. Tommy shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the shed. "There's talk in town. Some of Henderson's guys were at Riley's bar last night, bragging about how they were going to convince the holdouts to see reason." Mac's hand moved to Storm's tactical vest, feeling the powerful muscles coiled beneath. The dog's posture remained perfectly controlled, but she could sense his heightened alertness. These weren't just pets responding to their owner's tension. They were combat-trained assets reading their handlers' signals. "Tommy," Mac's voice remained steady, "take the truck and make the morning deliveries to the farmer's market. Stay in town until I call you." The young man's eyes widened slightly. "But the afternoon chores will wait," Mac finished firmly. Years of commanding Marine K-9 units had taught her when to remove potential civilian casualties from an evolving, tactical situation. "Go on now." As Tommy's truck disappeared down the dirt road, Mac conducted a more thorough examination of the shed's perimeter. The dogs moved in practiced formation, their training evident in every precise movement. Echo's behavior confirmed what she'd suspected. Multiple individuals had approached the shed from different angles during the night, conducting what appeared to be a reconnaissance. Mac smiled grimly as she radioed her neighbor, Sarah Redwood, a retired Army MP who'd become a close friend since Mac purchased the farm 3 years ago. "Sarah, looks like we might have some uninvited guests tonight. Might want to have your radio handy." The response came back immediately. "Copy that, Mac. Want me to call the sheriff?" "Not yet," Mac replied, watching Storm indicate another access point that had been tested. "Let's see what kind of show they're planning first." As the morning sun climbed higher, Mac made her preparations with the methodical precision that had kept her alive through 3 combat tours. The Henderson Group's thugs thought they'd found an easy target, a stubborn old farmer who could be frightened into selling. They were about to learn why you don't threaten a Marine K9 handler on her own territory. The dogs maintained their patrol pattern as Mac went about her daily routine, but there was nothing routine about their heightened awareness. Years of training had prepared them for exactly this type of escalating threat scenario. Tonight would determine whether the Henderson Group learned their lesson, or whether Shadow Creek Farm would need to demonstrate exactly why its security wasn't just for show. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Shadow Creek Farm as Mac reviewed her security footage from the previous night. Her command center, disguised as a routine office in the farmhouse's basement, housed sophisticated surveillance equipment that would have surprised most of her neighbors. 25 years in Marine Corps K9 operations had taught her the value of proper intelligence gathering. Storm lay alert at her feet, while Ranger and Echo maintained their outdoor patrol. The footage showed 4 men examining the shed's perimeter, their movements suggesting professional training, private security, or ex-military. Mac recognized the tactical approach patterns they used. These weren't ordinary thugs. The Henderson Group had hired professionals. Her thoughts drifted to her final deployment in Kurdistan, where her K9 units had protected crucial infrastructure from sophisticated insurgent teams. She'd spent years developing protocols for her dogs that went far beyond standard military training. Storm, Ranger, and Echo represented the culmination of that experience. Each dog specialized in different aspects of tactical response. "Your dogs are different," Tommy had observed during his first week working at the farm. "The way they move, how they respond to commands, they're not like any farm dogs I've seen." Mac had simply smiled, not mentioning how Storm had served. 2 tours detecting IEDs in Afghanistan before she'd adopted him, or how Ranger and Echo were descended from her original military breeding program. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah Redwood entered, her civilian clothes not quite hiding her military bearing. At 62, the former Army MP still moved with the precise efficiency that had earned her multiple commendations. "Thought you could use these," Sarah said, placing a folder on Mac's desk. "Henderson's current security team, backgrounds and photos. Still have some contacts in Army intelligence who owe me favors." Mac examined the files, her expression hardening as she recognized one face. Marcus Kendrick. Worked with him in Baghdad in 2009. He was good, but he got pushed out for being too aggressive. Started taking private contracts after that. Sarah nodded grimly. "He's Henderson's new head of security. Word is they brought him in specifically to handle the stubborn landowners. 3 farms have sold in the last month after experiencing mysterious equipment failures and property damage." Through the window, Mac watched Storm signal a perimeter alert to his siblings. The dogs moved, in perfect coordination, investigating what turned out to be a wandering deer. Their training showed in every movement, the precise sweeping patterns, the way they maintained overlapping fields of observation. "They don't know what they're dealing with," Sarah noted, watching the dogs work. "Henderson thinks he's just pressuring another old farmer." Mac's smile held no warmth. "That's usually an advantage. Storm alone has more tactical operations experience than most private security teams." She didn't mention the specialized training protocols she'd developed, the ones that had earned her unit commendations from 3 different military branches. Sarah examined the surveillance footage carefully. "They're testing your defenses." establishing patterns. Classic pre-operation reconnaissance, planning something bigger than simple vandalism. I know, Mac replied, pulling up thermal imaging from her perimeter sensors. They spent extra time examining the irrigation control room, probably planning to sabotage the water supply, force me to miss the crucial pre-winter crop preparation. Her mind went back to her first K9 training command in Afghanistan, where her dogs had protected vital water infrastructure from insurgent attacks. She'd learned then that protecting resources required more than just guards. It required understanding. How your opponent thinks, anticipating their moves before they make them. Storm suddenly raised his head, alerting to something beyond human perception. Seconds later, Mac's phone rang. Tommy calling from town. Mac, you need to hear this. Henderson's guys are at Riley's again. He hesitated. They're talking about making examples. Said something about tonight, about showing what happens to people who don't cooperate. Mac shared a look with Sarah. Stay in town, Tommy. Don't come back to the farm until I call you. She ended the call, turning to her old friend. They're moving faster than expected. Want me to call Sheriff Patterson? Sarah asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Not yet, Mac replied, checking her security feeds again. Patterson's a good man, but he's overwhelmed. Henderson's got too much influence with the county commissioners. We need to handle this our way first. The afternoon light was fading as Sarah departed, promising to maintain radio contact through the night. Mac began her evening security routine, but this time with heightened attention to detail. Storm, Ranger, and Echo moved through their patrol patterns with deadly focus, their training allowing them to detect the slightest change in their environment. In the growing darkness, Mac reflected on how her military experience had prepared her for this moment. The Henderson group thought they were dealing with a simple farmer, someone who could be scared into selling with a few acts of vandalism. They didn't understand that Shadow Creek Farm was protected by over 2 decades of specialized military, K9 training, 3 combat-experienced dogs, and a handler who had developed some of the most advanced K9 tactical response protocols in modern warfare. Tonight would determine whether they learned that lesson the easy way, or whether her dogs would need to demonstrate exactly why their military training made them so much more than simple farm guardians. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Moonlight filtered through scattered clouds as Mac completed her evening security checks. The temperature had dropped sharply, typical for Montana in October, creating perfect conditions for thermal imaging. Storm, Ranger, and Echo maintained their patrol patterns with practiced efficiency, their tactical vests equipped with advanced security features that most civilians wouldn't recognize. The first indication of trouble came at precisely 11:42 p.m. Storm's behavior shifted subtly, a change in his patrol rhythm that Mac recognized from countless combat operations. Through her thermal sensors, she detected 4 heat signatures approaching from the north, using the remaining corn stalks as cover. Their movement patterns confirmed what she'd suspected. These were trained professionals. Sarah, we have visitors, Mac spoke quietly into her secured radio. 4 approaching from the north, 2 more holding position near the access road. Her tactical assessment was automatic, drawing on years of combat experience. They're using standard private security formations. Copy that. Sarah's response was immediate. Want me to move to backup position? Negative. Maintain overwatch. Let's see what they're planning first. Mac watched through her security feeds as the team approached her shed. Their movements were coordinated, professional, but they made one crucial mistake. They assumed the farm's security consisted solely of basic cameras and locks. They hadn't detected the sophisticated motion sensors, the pressure plates, or the specialized equipment that allowed her dogs to track multiple targets in complete darkness. The sound of breaking glass shattered the night's silence. They'd breached the shed's window, just as Mac had anticipated. Storm's muscles tensed beneath her hand, but his training held. No barking, no movement without command. These weren't ordinary guard dogs that would alert intruders to their presence. Got your equipment rigged up nice here, a voice carried from the shed. Mac recognized it from the surveillance footage. Marcus Kendrick. Shame if something were to happen to these control systems. Farming's a dangerous business, lots of unfortunate accidents. Mac stepped out of the shadows, her movement deliberate and controlled. Storm, Ranger, and Echo remained hidden, positioned exactly where their training dictated. Interesting definition of accident, Marcus. They teach you that in Baghdad, or did you learn it working for Henderson? The security team spun toward her voice, weapons raising instinctively before lowering slightly. In the moonlight, she could see the moment Marcus recognized her. McPherson? Well, this is unexpected. Heard you were just some stubborn farmer. And I heard you were smarter than this, Mac replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding in combat zones. Breaking and entering, attempted vandalism. Pretty sloppy for someone with your background. Marcus stepped forward, his confidence returning. This isn't a military operation, Mac. This is business. Mr. Henderson has plans for this valley, and your farm is in the way. Walk away now. No one needs to get hurt. That's your first mistake, Mac answered calmly, thinking this isn't a tactical situation. Her hand moved slightly, signaling a command that only years of specialized training would recognize. Storm, illuminate. The night erupted in coordinated movement as Storm emerged from his position, specialized equipment in his tactical vest activating to illuminate the intruders with targeting markers. Before Marcus's team could react, Ranger and Echo had taken flanking positions, their training, allowing them to move like shadows while maintaining perfect tactical coordination. What the? One of Marcus's men started to raise his weapon, freezing as Storm's low growl carried across the yard. It wasn't the bark of a guard dog. It was the focused warning of a combat-trained military K9. Second mistake, Mac continued, her voice unchanging. Not researching your target properly. 25 years training military working dogs, Marcus. Wrote half the protocols your security teams probably studied. These aren't farm dogs. They're combat veterans with more tactical operations experience than your entire team combined. Through her earpiece, she heard Sarah's quiet update. 2 by the road are pulling back, Mac. They didn't sign up for dealing with military K9s. Marcus's expression hardened as he reassessed the situation. The confident security contractor was gone, replaced by the tactical operator who recognized when an operation had gone sideways. His men were surrounded, covered by 3 dogs that moved with military precision, their tactical vests indicating capabilities far beyond standard security canines. Henderson's not going to stop, Marcus warned, though his team was already backing toward their exit route. This farm, this whole valley, it's already been decided. Mac's smile held no warmth. Then you should warn him about my decision. I spent my career training dogs to protect vital infrastructure from professional hostiles. This farm, these dogs, they're not just security. They're a defense system designed by someone who specialized in stopping exactly this kind of operation. Storm's growl deepened as one of Marcus's men moved too quickly. The dog's training was evident in his perfectly controlled aggression, ready to engage but waiting for exact commands. You've got 10 seconds to clear my property, Mac stated calmly. After that, my dogs switched to combat protocols. Want to guess how many of those operations in Baghdad involved K9 units? The security team retreated with professional efficiency, maintaining defensive positions until they cleared the cornfield. Mac watched through her thermal imaging as all 6 heat signatures moved toward their vehicles, their formation now focused on protection rather than aggression. Clear, Sarah confirmed over the radio. They're pulling out, but Mac... I know, Mac replied, scratching Storm behind his ears as Ranger and Echo resumed their patrol patterns. This was just the first move. They'll be back, better prepared, next time. As the sound of vehicles faded into the night, Mac surveyed her property with practiced eyes. The Henderson Group had just learned that Shadow Creek Farm wasn't defended by simple agricultural security. Now they would have to decide whether to retreat or escalate against a target that had spent decades preparing for exactly this type of confrontation. Storm, Ranger, and Echo moved through the darkness with deadly grace, their training never wavering. The night's events had demonstrated exactly why Mac had chosen these specific dogs, trained them with specialized protocols, and maintained their tactical capabilities, even in retirement. The real question wasn't whether Henderson would try again. It was whether he would be smart enough to recognize exactly what kind of fight he was picking. Dawn painted the Montana sky in shades of amber and gold as Mac reviewed the night's security footage with Sarah. Storm maintained his guard position while Ranger and Echo conducted their morning patrol, their behavior showing no signs of fatigue despite the previous night's confrontation. They weren't expecting this level of resistance, Sarah observed, studying the thermal recordings of Marcus's team retreating. Look at their formation changes. They switched from offensive to defensive protocols the moment they recognized military K9 units. Mac nodded, her experienced eyes catching details others might miss. Their equipment was sophisticated, encrypted communications, advanced night vision. Henderson's investing serious resources into this operation. She paused the footage, zooming in on one of the team members. This one's movements are familiar. Military background, probably Force Recon. The sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention. Through the security feeds, they watched Tommy's truck arrive, followed by Sheriff Patterson's patrol car. The dogs adjusted their patrol pattern automatically, maintaining tactical coverage while accommodating known friendlies. "Mac," Tommy called out, his voice carrying concern. "Sheriff needs to talk to you. It's important." Sheriff James Patterson had served the county for 15 years. His weathered face showed the strain of recent events as he entered Mac's office. "Got some troubling reports this morning. Break-ins at 2 other farms, equipment damaged. They're saying it was animals, but the damage patterns suggest professional sabotage," Mac finished, sharing a look with Sarah. "Just like the incidents that convinced the Weber and Mitchell families to sell." Patterson studied the security monitors, his law enforcement experience allowing him to recognize the sophistication of Mac's setup. "This is more than standard farm security, isn't it? Those dogs of yours. I've seen military K9 units in action. During my time in the service, your 3 move just like them." "Because that's what they are," Mac confirmed, watching Storm track movement at the property line. Just a deer, but his training never wavered. "Storm served 2 tours in Afghanistan before I adopted him. Ranger and Echo come from my specialized breeding program. 25 years developing tactical K9 protocols teaches you to stay prepared." The sheriff's radio crackled with a report of suspicious activity at the reservoir that supplied several local farms. Mac's attention sharpened. Water access was crucial for agricultural operations, especially with winter approaching. "Henderson's playing a bigger game," Sarah interjected, pulling up satellite imagery on Mac's system. "Look at the pattern. The farms he's targeting all control key water rights. This isn't just about a luxury resort. He's trying to control the valley's water supply." Tommy, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "That's why the irrigation control systems in your shed were their primary target. Without water access, even the most stubborn farmer would have to sell." Mac's tactical mind analyzed the emerging pattern. The Henderson Group wasn't just pressuring individual farmers, they were systematically targeting critical infrastructure. It was a strategy she'd seen before, during her final deployment protecting vital resources in combat zones. "Sheriff," she turned to Patterson, "how many complaints about equipment failure and property damage have you received in the past month?" 17, he replied grimly. "All dismissed as accidents or animal damage. But with Henderson's security, team operating in the area. They're creating deniable incidents," Sarah concluded. "Professional sabotage disguised as routine agricultural problems. Classic psychological warfare tactics." Mac's computer pinged with an alert from her perimeter sensors. Ranger had detected movement near the property's western boundary. Deliberate movement. Someone trying to stay hidden. Echo automatically shifted position to maintain tactical coverage while Storm intensified his guard stance. "They're watching," Mac noted, studying the thermal signature. "Gathering intelligence, analyzing our capabilities after last night's confrontation." She turned to Tommy. "I need you to check something for me in town." Henderson's company would have filed water rights applications with the county clerk. "See what you can find out about their planned usage volumes." As Tommy departed, Sheriff Patterson studied the security footage from the previous night. "This is going to escalate, isn't it? Henderson's not used to resistance, especially not from someone with your specialized background. Count on it," Mac confirmed, her hand resting on Storm's tactical vest. "They'll analyze what happened last night, adapt their approach. Next time they'll come better prepared, probably try to neutralize the dogs first." Sarah's expression hardened. "They don't understand what they're dealing with. These aren't ordinary security K9s that can be distracted or disabled with standard countermeasures." "No," Mac agreed, watching her dogs maintain their precise patrol patterns. "They're the result of 25 years developing advanced tactical protocols. Every countermeasure they might try, every technique they might use, I've trained dogs to handle worse in actual combat zones." Through her monitors, Mac tracked multiple thermal signatures moving through the surrounding properties. The Henderson group was conducting reconnaissance, probably planning their next move. They had learned that Shadow Creek Farm's defenses were more sophisticated than expected, but that would only change their tactics, not their objective. "I need to make some calls," Mac told Patterson. "Still have contacts in military K9 programs who monitor private security operations. Time to find out exactly who Henderson's hired, what resources they have access to." As the sheriff departed, Mac began preparing for what she knew was coming. The Henderson group had just discovered that one of their targets was a veteran K9 handler with decades of combat experience. Their next move would reveal whether they were smart enough to back off or foolish enough to escalate against someone who had spent their career training dogs to counter exactly the kind of tactics they employed. Storm, Ranger, and Echo continued their patrol, their military training evident in every movement. They had faced worse threats in actual combat zones, and Mac had spent decades ensuring they could handle anything from simple security incidents to sophisticated tactical operations. The question wasn't whether they were prepared for escalation. It was whether Henderson's team was prepared to face the full capabilities of properly trained military K9 units. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Shadow Creek Farm as Mac surveyed the damage to her irrigation system. The sabotage was professional, targeted to cause maximum disruption while appearing as routine mechanical failure. Storm prowled the perimeter of the damaged equipment, his specialized training allowing him to detect traces of the intruder's presence that ordinary security systems would miss. "They struck during shift change," Sarah observed, examining the sophisticated cuts in the main water line. "Used our patrol patterns against us. These guys are good, Mac. Military precision." Mac's expression remained neutral, but her tactical assessment was automatic. The attackers had exploited a 3-minute window when the dogs were transitioning between patrol zones, a vulnerability that only someone with intimate knowledge of military K9 protocols would recognize. Tommy arrived from town, his young face tight with concern. "Mac, you need to see this." He handed her a stack of papers from the county clerk's office. Henderson's filed for complete water rights to the entire valley. The paperwork was submitted months ago, before they even started approaching farmers about selling. Before Mac could respond, her security system pinged with an alert. Ranger had detected movement near the western fence line. Deliberate, professional movement. Echo automatically shifted to cover the potential threat, while Storm maintained his position guarding Mac and the others. Through her tactical scope, Mac spotted 3 men in sophisticated camouflage gear setting up what appeared to be surveillance equipment. Their positioning was expert level, nearly invisible to conventional security measures, but they hadn't counted on facing dogs trained to detect and counter advanced reconnaissance operations. "They're not even trying to hide anymore," Sarah noted grimly. "This is psychological warfare, letting us see them to create pressure." Mac's radio crackled with Sheriff Patterson's voice. "Mac, we've got problems. 3 more farms reported major equipment failures overnight. The Mitchell family's entire irrigation system was destroyed. They're signing their sale papers this afternoon." The sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention. 2 black SUVs rolled up the main drive, their tinted windows and reinforced frames speaking of professional security operations. Marcus. Kendrick emerged from the lead vehicle, followed by men wearing tactical gear that Mac recognized from private military contractors. "Last chance, Mac," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Mr. Henderson wants to be reasonable, but after last night's demonstration, he's authorized more. Decisive measures." Storm's muscles tensed beneath Mac's hand, but his training held. These weren't ordinary guard dogs that would react to simple provocations. They maintained perfect tactical discipline, waiting for specific commands. "Interesting choice of words," Mac replied, her voice steady. "Decisive measures. That's what we called it in Baghdad when we needed to maintain deniability. Tell me, Marcus, does Henderson know about your team's background? The operations that got you dismissed from military service?" Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You've done your homework, but you're not in the Marines anymore, and these aren't combat zones. This is business. Look around. You're surrounded. Even your military dogs can't watch every angle." If to emphasize his point, Mac's security system detected multiple teams moving into position around the property. Professional operators using advanced tactics, trying to establish overlapping fields of control. "That's where you're wrong," Mac responded calmly. "Storm, Ranger, Echo, Elimination Protocol Delta." The dogs moved like liquid shadow, their years of specialized training unleashing in perfect coordination. Before Marcus's teams could react, all their carefully established positions were compromised. The dogs hadn't just detected their locations. They had systematically neutralized every tactical advantage the security teams thought they possessed. "Jesus," one of Marcus's men muttered, watching the dogs move with military precision. "Those aren't normal K9 units. Their movement patterns, their tactical coordination. Because they're not just military dogs," Mac stated firmly. "They're the result of 25 years developing advanced combat protocols. Every tactic you're using, every strategy you've planned, I spent my career training dogs to counter exactly these kinds of operations." The sound of breaking glass shattered the tension. Through her security feeds, Mac spotted more of Henderson's men attempting to breach the farmhouse while attention was focused on Marcus. But Storm had already anticipated this move, his training allowing him to detect the flanking maneuver before it fully developed. The attackers found themselves suddenly facing a perfectly coordinated response from 3 dogs that moved with lethal precision. Their tactical gear, their professional training, their careful planning. None of it had prepared them for dealing with K9 units specifically trained to counter advanced military operations. "You've got 1 minute to clear my property," Mackie announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding in combat situations. "After that, my dogs switched to full combat protocols. Want to find out why they were specifically requested for high-risk tactical operations?" Marcus's expression hardened as he assessed the situation. His teams were compromised, their positions exposed, their tactical advantages neutralized by 3 dogs that operated with unprecedented coordination and precision. "This isn't over," he warned, signaling his men to fall back. "Henderson's invested too much. The valley's water rights, the development plans, it's bigger than just your farm." "Then tell Henderson he should have researched his targets better," Mac replied, watching Storm track the retreating teams with predatory focus. "Because he just started a fight with someone who spent their career preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation." As the security teams withdrew, Mac surveyed the damage to her irrigation system. The sabotage was professional, designed to force her into selling, but they had miscalculated badly in thinking she would be an easy target. "They'll be back," Sarah stated quietly, watching the black SUVs disappear down the access road. This was just their opening move. Mac smiled grimly, scratching Storm behind his ears as Ranger and Echo resumed their patrol patterns. "I know. But they just learned why military canine handlers are considered among the most dangerous opponents in tactical operations. The question is whether Henderson is smart enough to understand exactly what kind of fight he started." Evening settled over Shadow Creek Farm as Mac spread topographical maps across her command center desk. Storm maintained his guard position while Ranger and Echo continued their patrol rotations, their behavior reflecting years of specialized training in prolonged tactical operations. Sarah studied the satellite imagery of the valley, her military experience evident in her systematic analysis. Henderson's development plans make more sense now. The reservoir feeds 5 major water channels. Control those, and you control agricultural operations across 3 counties. "It's not just about luxury resorts," Tommy added, pointing to the water rights documentation he'd uncovered. "They're planning something bigger. The water usage estimates in these permits, they're far beyond what any resort would need." Mac's tactical mind processed the information, drawing on decades of experience protecting critical infrastructure. Through her security feeds, she watched Storm signal a perimeter alert. The dog's behavior confirmed what her instruments were, showing more surveillance teams establishing observation posts around the property. "They're adapting their approach," Mac noted, reviewing thermal imaging data. "Notice the positioning. They're establishing multiple angles of observation while maintaining communication blackout zones. These aren't ordinary security contractors anymore." Sarah's expression hardened as she recognized the pattern. "These are advanced tactical teams, probably ex-special forces. Henderson's bringing in serious operators." Mac's computer pinged with an incoming secure message. Her military contacts had come through with intelligence on Henderson's recent operations. "Just as I suspected. He's hired Blackstream Solutions, private military contractors specializing in resource acquisition operations. They've got a history of helping corporations secure water rights in disputed territories." Through her tactical scope, Mac observed one of the surveillance teams attempting to map her security perimeter. Their movement patterns were professional, almost perfect, but they hadn't counted on facing dogs specifically trained to counter. Advanced reconnaissance operations. "Storm, passive counter-surveillance protocol," Mac commanded softly. The dog moved with deadly grace, his specialized training allowing him to disrupt the observer's sightlines without revealing his own capabilities. Ranger and Echo automatically adjusted their patterns to maintain comprehensive coverage. "They're good," Sarah acknowledged, watching the thermal feeds. "But they're still thinking like conventional operators. They don't understand what they're dealing with." Mac's smile held no warmth as she reviewed her tactical preparations. 25 years of developing military canine protocols had taught her to prepare for every contingency. Her dogs weren't just trained for basic security, they were capable of executing complex counter-surveillance operations, neutralizing sophisticated electronic warfare, and maintaining tactical superiority against professional military teams. "Tommy," Mac turned to her young farmhand, "I need you to do something important. Take these documents to Judge Martinez in the morning. They prove Henderson filed fraudulent water rights claims, but more importantly, your delivery will draw their attention." Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. "You're using their surveillance against them, while they're focused on Tommy and the documents." "We expose their real objective," Mac confirmed, watching Storm track another surveillance team's movements. "Henderson's not just after my farm. He needs control of specific water access points to make his larger operation work." The night air carried the sound of distant vehicles, more security teams taking position. Mac's security system detected sophisticated electronic surveillance equipment being deployed. They were preparing for a major operation, probably planning to neutralize her defenses systematically. Mac, Tommy's voice carried concern. These guys, they're not just trying to pressure you into selling anymore, are they? No, Mac replied, checking her dog's tactical vests. Each contained specialized equipment that most military units wouldn't recognize, developed through years of combat zone experience. They've realized I'm a serious obstacle. Now they're treating this like a military operation. Sarah studied the surveillance feeds, her expression grim. They'll try to neutralize the dogs first. Standard tactical protocol when dealing with canine units. Eliminate the strongest defensive asset. They can try, Mac stated calmly, feeling Storm's muscles tense as he detected more movement around the perimeter. But these aren't standard military dogs. Every tactic they might use, every countermeasure they might employ, I've trained them to handle worse in actual combat zones. The command center's systems continued tracking multiple surveillance teams establishing positions. Mac's tactical assessment was automatic. They were preparing for a coordinated operation, probably planning to strike from multiple angles simultaneously. Sarah, I need you to coordinate with Sheriff Patterson, Mac instructed, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone used to commanding in crisis situations. When this goes down, we'll need official response teams ready to move in at exactly the right moment. As her friend departed, Mac began final preparations for what she knew was coming. Henderson's teams were professional, well-equipped, and highly trained. But they were about to learn why military canine handlers were considered among the most dangerous opponents in tactical operations. Storm, Ranger, and Echo maintained their patrol patterns with deadly precision, their training never wavering. Years of specialized experience had prepared them for exactly this type of sophisticated threat. The question wasn't whether they could handle Blackstream's tactical teams, it was whether Henderson's operators were prepared to face dogs specifically trained to counter their most advanced techniques. Get some rest, Mac told Tommy, watching. Her security feeds track more surveillance teams moving into position. Tomorrow we show them exactly why you don't threaten a veteran canine handler on her own territory. The pre-dawn darkness shrouded Shadow Creek Farm in deep shadows as Mac monitored her security feeds. Storm had detected the first signs of movement at precisely 3:17 a.m. Multiple teams approaching from different vectors, their tactical coordination indicating extensive professional training. Ranger and Echo maintained their positions, their specialized equipment allowing them to track the intruders without revealing their own capabilities. Initial teams in position, Sarah's voice carried quietly through their secured channel. Thermal showing 12 operators, using advanced movement patterns. These aren't regular contractors anymore. Mac watched through her tactical displays as Blackstream's teams established their positions. Their approach was methodical, professional, exactly what she'd expect from ex-Special Forces operators. They were using sophisticated electronic warfare equipment, attempting to disable her security systems while masking their own signatures. They're good, Mac acknowledged, observing their systematic advance. Notice the formation? Classic counter-canine. Tactics. They're trying to create separate engagement zones, prevent the dogs from supporting each other. Through her thermal imaging, she spotted Marcus Kendrick coordinating the operation from a concealed position near the access road. His team had deployed what appeared to be specialized sonic equipment, standard countermeasures for dealing with military working dogs. Time to show them why that won't work, Mac stated calmly. Storm, Ranger, Echo, Protocol Sigma active. The dogs moved like shadows through the darkness, their years of specialized training evident in every precise movement. Blackstream's teams had prepared for standard military canine units, but they weren't ready for dogs specifically trained to counter their most advanced tactics. The first sign that something was wrong came when their electronic warfare equipment failed to disrupt Mac's security network. Instead of losing capabilities, her systems adapted automatically, a defensive protocol she'd developed during her final deployment protecting critical infrastructure. What the hell? One of the operators muttered over their tactical channel, which Mac's systems had already compromised. Their dogs aren't responding to the sonic deterrents. They should be completely disoriented. Mac smiled grimly as Storm executed a perfect flanking maneuver, systematically dismantling the intruder's carefully planned positions. 25 years developing canine protocols teaches you to prepare for everything, she spoke into her radio, knowing they could hear her now, including sonic countermeasures. The night erupted in coordinated chaos as Blackstream's teams realized their tactical advantage was evaporating. Ranger and Echo moved with lethal precision, their training allowing them to neutralize sophisticated electronic warfare equipment while maintaining perfect tactical coordination. "Fall back to secondary positions," Marcus ordered, his voice carrying frustration as his careful planning unraveled. "Concentrate fire on Sector 3. Force the dogs to—" His command cut off as Storm materialized from the darkness, taking down 2 operators before they could adjust their position. The dog's tactical vest contained specialized equipment that rendered their night vision systems useless while allowing him to move with perfect precision. "Jesus Christ," another operator called out, watching Ranger systematically dismantle their sonic deterrent array. These aren't normal K9 units. Their movement patterns, their tactical coordination, this is something else entirely. Mac's voice carried across their compromised communications channel. "Did Henderson not tell you who you were facing? 25 years developing advanced combat protocols. Every tactic you're using, every strategy you've planned, I've trained dogs to counter all of it in actual combat zones." Through her tactical displays, she watched Blackstream's carefully orchestrated operation collapse. Their teams were professional, well-equipped, and highly trained, but they weren't prepared for dogs specifically designed to defeat their most sophisticated techniques. "Mac," Sarah's voice carried quiet urgency. "They're bringing in their heavy equipment. Armored vehicles moving up the access road." Before the vehicles could reach their positions, Echo had already implemented the next phase of their defense. The dog's specialized training allowed him to deploy countermeasures that disabled the vehicle's electronic systems, rendering them useless. "Impressive operation you planned," Mac spoke into the compromised channel, watching Storm coordinate with his siblings to systematically eliminate every tactical advantage Blackstream had established. "Professional approach, sophisticated equipment, excellent tactical coordination. But you made one crucial mistake." "We're not done," Marcus responded, though his voice carried uncertainty now. "Henderson's invested too much to back off. The water rights, the development plans." "That's not the mistake I meant," Mac interrupted calmly. "You assumed you were dealing with standard military K9 units, dogs that could be countered with conventional tactics. Instead, you're facing the results of 25 years developing protocols specifically designed to defeat operators exactly like you." The night air filled with the sound of disabled equipment and compromised positions as the dogs executed their coordinated response. Blackstream's teams found themselves systematically stripped of every advantage, their professional training rendered ineffective by 3 dogs operating with unprecedented tactical precision. "Pull back," Marcus finally ordered, watching his careful planning disintegrate. "Full retreat, all units disengage." As Blackstream's operators withdrew, leaving behind sophisticated equipment disabled by Mac's specialized countermeasures, Storm, Ranger, and Echo maintained their tactical positions. Their training had allowed them to neutralize a professional military team without a single shot fired. "They'll be back," Sarah noted, watching the thermal signatures retreat. "Henderson won't accept this kind of failure." Max scratched Storm behind his ears, rewarding his perfect execution while Ranger and Echo continued their patrol. "I know. But now they understand exactly what they're dealing with. The question is whether Henderson is smart enough to recognize when he's picked a fight he can't win." The morning sun began to paint the horizon as Max surveyed the aftermath of the night's operation. Blackstream's sophisticated equipment lay disabled across her property, silent testimony to the effectiveness of her specialized K9 protocols. They had tried to neutralize her defenses with professional military tactics, only to discover that her dogs were specifically trained to counter their most advanced techniques. The real fight was just beginning, but Henderson's team had learned a crucial lesson about threatening a veteran canine handler on her own territory. The question wasn't whether they would try again, it was whether they would be wise enough to realize exactly what kind of opponent they were facing. The midday sun beat down on Shadow Creek Farm as Mac assessed the damage from Blackstream's night operation. Though her defenses had held, the sophisticated electronic warfare equipment they deployed had taken its toll. Several of her security sensors were compromised, and the irrigation system had suffered collateral damage during the confrontation. Storm moved with measured precision beside her, his behavior showing no fatigue despite the night's intense tactical engagement. Through her security feeds, Mac watched Ranger and Echo maintaining their patrol patterns, compensating for the damaged sensor network with increased vigilance. "They're adapting faster than expected," Sarah observed, examining the disabled equipment Blackstream had abandoned. "This sonic deterrent system, it's military grade but modified. They're developing specialized countermeasures for your dogs." Before Mac could respond, Tommy's truck came racing up the access road, kicking up dust clouds in its wake. The young man's face was tight with urgency as he jumped out. "Mac, they hit the Mitchell's place last night while everyone was focused here. Their entire winter seed storage, destroyed, and the irrigation pumps for 3 other farms were sabotaged." Mac's tactical mind processed this new information. While Blackstream had engaged her defenses directly, they'd also struck at more vulnerable targets. It was a sophisticated strategy: divide defensive resources by creating multiple crisis points. "That's not all," Tommy continued, his voice shaking slightly. "Henderson's men visited my mother's diner in town this morning. Said accidents can happen to anyone, especially small businesses with old electrical wiring." Storm's muscles tensed beneath Mac's hand, the dog sensing her controlled anger. These weren't just tactical threats anymore. Henderson was targeting civilians, escalating beyond professional military engagement into something more dangerous. Through her thermal imaging, Mac spotted movement at the property line. More surveillance teams taking position, but their pattern had changed. They weren't just observing, they were establishing firing positions with clear lines of sight to critical infrastructure. "Sarah," Mac's voice carried quiet authority, "get Tommy's mother out of town. Use your military contacts if you have." 2. This isn't standard corporate intimidation anymore. As Sarah moved to comply, Mac's security system pinged with multiple alerts. Blackstream's teams were deploying more sophisticated equipment, including what appeared to be signal jammers designed to disrupt her communications network. "Mac," Sheriff Patterson's voice crackled through their backup channel, "got reports of armed security teams moving through the valley. They're setting up checkpoints on access roads, claiming it's private property surveillance." Mac watched through her tactical scope as more Blackstream operators took position around her perimeter. Their movement patterns had evolved, incorporating lessons learned from the night's engagement. They were adapting their tactics, preparing for a more sophisticated approach. Storm suddenly shifted stance, detecting something beyond normal security parameters. Seconds later, Mac's systems confirmed his warning. Electronic warfare signatures suggesting preparation for a coordinated cyber attack on her defensive network. "They're not just trying to disable our security anymore," Mac noted watching. "Ranger signal another tactical anomaly. They're setting up for a sustained operation, planning to isolate the farm completely." Tommy studied the satellite imagery on Mac's monitors, his young face showing growing concern. "The water readings from the reservoir, they're dropping faster than normal agricultural use would explain. Henderson's teams must have accessed the control systems." Mac's expression hardened as she processed the implications. "Control the water supply, create a crisis, force compliance through resource deprivation." It was a tactic she'd seen deployed in combat zones, now being used against American farmers. Through her command center windows, she spotted more armored vehicles moving into position along the county road. Blackstream wasn't trying to hide their presence anymore. They were establishing a visible show of force, creating psychological pressure while preparing for their next tactical engagement. "Mac," Sarah's voice carried tension as she returned. Henderson's people are spreading rumors in town, saying your military background makes you dangerous, that your dogs are a threat to public safety. They're trying to turn the community against you. Storm's low growl provided split-second warning before Mac's primary communications network went dark. Blackstream had launched their cyber attack, more sophisticated than their previous attempts. But Mac had spent years preparing for exactly this type of escalation. They think cutting communications will isolate us, Mac stated calmly, activating her backup systems. But they don't understand what they're dealing with. 25 years of military operations teaches you to prepare for every contingency. The afternoon heat shimmered across her property as Mac observed Blackstream's teams continuing to establish their positions. They were preparing for something bigger than their previous operation. A coordinated assault designed to overwhelm even her sophisticated defenses. "What's our next move?" Tommy asked, watching more security teams deploy around the perimeter. "They're not just trying to pressure you anymore. This is starting to look like an actual military operation." Mac smiled grimly, checking her dog's tactical equipment while assessing Blackstream's deployment patterns. "Now we show them why military K9 handlers are considered among the most dangerous opponents in tactical operations. They think they've learned our capabilities, adapted to our defenses. Time to demonstrate why you don't threaten a veteran handler and her dogs without considering every possible response." The sun began its descent toward the mountains as Mac finalized her preparations. Blackstream's teams were professional, well-equipped, and highly trained. But they were about to learn that 25 years of developing specialized K9 protocols had prepared her for exactly this type of escalation. Storm, Ranger, and Echo maintained their tactical positions, their training allowing them to adapt automatically to the changing threat environment. The real question wasn't whether they could handle Blackstream's evolved tactics. It was whether Henderson's operators were prepared to face dogs specifically trained to counter even their most sophisticated strategies. Evening cast long shadows across Shadow Creek Farm as Mac reviewed the day's surveillance footage in her command center. The physical and psychological toll of maintaining constant tactical readiness was beginning to show, though years of military experience had taught her to manage extended high-stress operations. Storm rested his head on her lap, his vigilance unwavering despite the exhaustion that came from 24 hours of intensified security protocols. The emotional weight of the situation had begun to manifest in unexpected ways. Through her monitors, Mac watched Ranger and Echo maintaining their patrol patterns with military precision, but she could detect subtle signs of strain in their behavior. These weren't just security assets following protocols, they were partners who had stood beside her through countless operations, now facing a threat to their home. "The community's starting to fracture," Sarah reported, setting down a fresh cup of coffee. "Henderson's psychological warfare is working. The Weber family signed their sale papers this morning after their grandson lost his college scholarship. Apparently, the university received anonymous concerns about his character." Mac's expression remained controlled, but her hand tightened slightly on Storm's tactical vest. The escalation had moved beyond professional military engagement into something more insidious. Blackstream wasn't just targeting her defenses, they were systematically dismantling the community's will to resist. "Tommy's mother received another visit," Sarah continued, her voice carrying carefully contained anger. "The health inspector showed up, citing anonymous complaints, found just enough violations to suspend her license temporarily. The timing, right after she spoke up at the town council meeting." Through her thermal imaging, Mac tracked more Blackstream teams establishing observation posts. Their psychological operations were sophisticated, clearly designed by someone with extensive military experience in breaking civilian resistance. They were creating an environment of uncertainty and fear, isolating potential opposition while maintaining plausible deniability. "Mac," Tommy's voice carried strain as he entered, "the feed supplier just canceled our winter contract, said they've entered an exclusive agreement with Henderson's development group. Without those supplies, we'd lose the ability to maintain livestock through the winter." Mac finished, her tactical mind already calculating alternatives. The strategy was clear. systematically eliminate support infrastructure, create cascading points of pressure, force capitulation through resource deprivation. Storm suddenly tensed, detecting movement beyond their normal security perimeter. Through her tactical scope, Mac observed what appeared to be news vans approaching the county road. Blackstream's teams adjusted their positions slightly, ensuring they remained just out of camera range while maintaining tactical coverage. Local media, Sarah confirmed after checking her phone. Running a story about concerns over military-trained dogs in residential areas. They're painting you as a potential threat to public safety, using your combat experience against you. Mac watched the reporters setting up their equipment, noting how Blackstream's operators had positioned themselves to control access to neighboring properties. It was a sophisticated approach. Shape the narrative while maintaining physical isolation. Create a story that justified increased security presence while undermining public support. There's something else, Tommy added hesitantly. Some of the other farmers. They're saying maybe you're making things worse. That if you'd just sell, Henderson would ease up on everyone else. The words carried weight, hitting harder than any physical tactical engagement. Mac had spent her career protecting others, developing protocols that kept both handlers and civilians safe in combat zones. Now that same experience was being used to paint her as a danger to the community she'd sworn to defend. Through her security feeds, she watched Ranger alert to another potential threat. More vehicles approaching from the north. The dogs' training never wavered, despite the extended operational demands. These weren't just security assets following protocols. They were partners who understood exactly what was at stake. They're trying to make us doubt ourselves, Mac stated quietly, feeling Storm's reassuring presence beside her. Create division, isolate targets, break resistance through social pressure. Standard psychological warfare tactics, just applied domestically. Sarah studied the tactical displays, her military experience allowing her to recognize the sophisticated nature of Blackstream's operation. This isn't just about your farm anymore, is it? They're using this situation to perfect their techniques, for breaking community resistance, creating a playbook for future operations. Mac's hand moved to her tactical radio as another security alert pinged. More of Henderson's teams taking position, establishing overlapping fields of surveillance while maintaining their psychological pressure campaign. The strategy was comprehensive. Physical isolation, resource denial, social manipulation, all coordinated with military precision. We knew this would get worse before it got better, Mac acknowledged, watching Storm track multiple thermal signatures moving near the property line. But they've made one crucial mistake in their calculations. What's that? Tommy asked, his young face showing the strain of witnessing his community slowly fracture under sustained psychological pressure. They assume isolation is our weakness, Mac replied, scratching Storm behind his ears while monitoring Ranger and Echo's coordinated patrol patterns. But 25 years of military operations teaches you that true strength isn't just about tactical capability. It's about maintaining your principles under pressure, standing firm when others falter. The night settled around Shadow Creek Farm as Mac finalized her preparations for whatever came next. Blackstream's psychological warfare was sophisticated, their tactics professionally executed. But they were about to learn why military K9 handlers were considered among the most resilient opponents in extended operations. Storm, Ranger, and Echo maintained their vigilance, their training allowing them to adapt to the evolving threat environment while preserving their operational effectiveness. The real challenge wasn't whether they could handle Blackstream's evolved tactics. It was whether Henderson's operators understood the difference between breaking someone's resistance and strengthening their resolve. The true test was just beginning, and Mac had spent her career preparing her dogs for exactly this type of sustained psychological and tactical engagement. The question wasn't whether they could endure. It was whether Blackstream was prepared to face opponents who grew stronger under pressure. The pre-dawn quiet settled over Shadow Creek Farm as Mac analyzed new intelligence from her military contacts. Storm maintained his guard position while she studied documents that cast Henderson's operation in a disturbing new light. The tactical implications made her blood run cold. "This goes beyond water rights," Sarah stated quietly, examining satellite imagery showing construction already underway at multiple sites across the valley. Henderson's development group is just a front. Look at these facility specifications. They're not building a luxury resort. Mac's tactical assessment was automatic as she reviewed the technical plans, the infrastructure requirements, the security protocols, the specialized equipment being delivered under cover of construction materials. It all pointed to something far more sophisticated than real estate development. "They're building a private military training facility," Mac concluded, her experience allowing her to recognize the telltale signs. "Using the water rights acquisition as cover to establish a base of operations. That's why they needed control of specific properties, specific access points." Through her security feeds, she watched Rangers signal a perimeter alert. Blackstream's teams were rotating positions, maintaining their psychological pressure while establishing new tactical advantages. But their movement patterns had changed subtly, suggesting they were preparing for a different type of operation. "Mac," Tommy burst into the command center, his face pale. "Just intercepted communications between Henderson's teams. They're not just security contractors. They're recruiting, building some kind of private military force right here in Montana." Storm's muscles tensed as Mac's systems detected increased electronic warfare signatures. Blackstream was deploying more sophisticated equipment, preparing for what appeared to be a major tactical engagement. "It makes sense now," Sarah observed, studying thermal imaging showing new vehicles arriving at Henderson's compound. "The water rights control, the systematic pressure on local farmers, the professional military tactics. They're establishing a secure training zone, using the resort development as legal cover while building something much more dangerous." Mac's radio crackled with an encrypted transmission from Sheriff Patterson. "Got confirmation from federal contacts. Henderson's connected to multiple private military operations worldwide. They use this same playbook. Establish training facilities in remote areas, pressure local population into compliance, maintain deniable civilian cover." Through her tactical scope, Mac observed what appeared to be training equipment being delivered to recently acquired properties. The sophistication of the gear confirmed their suspicions. This was military-grade hardware being smuggled in under the guise of construction materials. "They're not just trying to force us out," Mac stated, watching Storm track multiple heat signatures moving with professional precision. "They're eliminating potential opposition before starting their real operation. That's why they escalated so quickly when we resisted. We're a direct threat to their entire infrastructure plan." Sarah's expression hardened as she analyzed communication patterns between Henderson's teams. "They're accelerating their timeline. The psychological warfare, the resource denial, the community pressure. It's all designed to clear the area before their main force arrives." Mac's security system suddenly pinged with multiple alerts. Blackstream's teams were deploying what appeared to be advanced surveillance equipment around critical infrastructure points. Their tactical positioning suggested preparation for a coordinated offensive. "Mac," Tommy's voice carried urgent concern, "more vehicles arriving at Henderson's compound. These aren't just security teams anymore. They look like training cadre, professional military instructors." Storm's low growl provided split-second warning before Mac's primary power grid went dark. Blackstream had launched a sophisticated attack on her infrastructure, more coordinated than their previous attempts. But the real target wasn't just her farm's defenses. "They're testing their operational protocols," Mac realized, watching Ranger and Echo automatically adjust to compensate for the power loss, using us as a live fire exercise to evaluate their training procedures. Every engagement, every tactical response, they're gathering data for their facilities' programs. Sarah studied the thermal feeds showing increased activity around the valley. This isn't just about land acquisition anymore. They're establishing a private army right here in American territory, using legitimate business operations as cover. Mac's tactical mind processed the implications while checking her dog's specialized equipment. Henderson wasn't just trying to pressure her into selling. He was eliminating a trained military operative who could expose his entire operation. That's why they brought in Blackstream specifically, she noted, watching Storm track multiple tactical teams moving into position. They're not just security contractors. They're instructor cadre, evaluating potential training protocols while eliminating security threats. Through her backup systems, Mac observed more armored vehicles arriving at Henderson's compound. The operation had evolved beyond simple corporate intimidation into something far more dangerous, the establishment of an unauthorized military training facility on American soil. "What's our next move?" Tommy asked, watching Blackstream's teams continue their systematic pressure campaign while preparing for escalated engagement. Mac smiled grimly, feeling Storm's reassuring presence beside her, while Ranger and Echo maintained their patrol patterns. "Now we show them why 25 years of military K-9 operations makes us their worst nightmare. They think they're gathering tactical data time to demonstrate why you don't use a veteran handler and her dogs as training targets." The morning sun began to paint the horizon as Mac finalized her preparations. Blackstream's operation was sophisticated, their true purpose masked by layers of legitimate business activity. But they had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They had assumed her military experience made her a simple security threat to be eliminated. Instead, they had given a veteran K-9 handler exactly the evidence needed to expose their entire operation. The question wasn't whether they could complete their training facility. It was whether they were prepared to face opponents specifically trained to dismantle exactly this type of covert military installation. Storm, Ranger, and Echo maintained their tactical positions, their training allowing them to adapt automatically to the evolved threat assessment. The real fight was just beginning, and Mac had spent her career preparing her dogs for exactly this type of sophisticated military engagement. The afternoon heat shimmered across Shadow Creek Farm as Mac coordinated with federal authorities through secured channels. Her military contacts had escalated the intelligence about Henderson's operation to multiple agencies, though the sophisticated nature of his cover operation complicated official response. 3 more training cadre arrived this morning, Sarah reported, studying satellite imagery showing increased activity at Henderson's compound. Former special operations, all with extensive experience in establishing covert training facilities. They're building something bigger than we initially thought. Storm maintained his guard position, while Mac analyzed new data streaming through her backup systems. Blackstream's teams had adapted their tactics, shifting from direct pressure to sophisticated containment operations. They were establishing a security perimeter that extended far beyond her property. "They're not just building one facility," Mac noted, observing thermal signatures suggesting construction at multiple sites. The valley's topography, the water rights control, the systematic property acquisition. They're creating an entire training complex, using the resort development as cover for multiple installations. Through her tactical feeds, she watched Ranger signal another security anomaly. More electronic warfare equipment was being deployed, but the pattern had changed. Instead of targeting her defenses directly, they were creating communication dead zones across the region. "Mac," Tommy's voice carried tension as he entered. "Just got word from town. Henderson's group submitted permits for additional construction. They're calling it infrastructure improvements, but look at these specifications." Mac studied the technical documents, her experience allowing her to recognize the true purpose behind the innocent-looking plans. What appeared to be resort utilities on paper matched exactly with requirements for sophisticated training facilities, shooting ranges disguised as maintenance areas, tactical driving courses hidden under recreational paths. "They're not trying to hide it anymore," Sarah observed, watching Blackstream's teams establish new positions around critical infrastructure points. "These are professional military installations being built right under everyone's nose. The resort is just the visible layer." Mac's security system suddenly pinged with multiple alerts. Her dogs had detected a new type of surveillance equipment being deployed, advanced systems typically reserved for specialized military operations. Federal responses being blocked, Sheriff Patterson reported through their secured channel. Henderson's got connections in Washington. They're calling it a local zoning issue, nothing to warrant federal investigation. Storm's muscles tensed as Mac processed this information. The operation wasn't just about establishing a covert training facility. It was a test case for something larger. If Henderson could successfully establish military infrastructure under civilian cover here, he could repeat the process anywhere in the country. Look at these training protocols, Sarah noted, examining documents they'd intercepted from Henderson's secure servers. They're not just teaching standard security procedures. This is advanced military doctrine, counterinsurgency operations, civilian population control, systematic resource denial. Through her tactical scope, Mac observed more specialized equipment being delivered to Henderson's compound. The sophistication of the gear confirmed their worst fears. This was a fully equipped military training operation being established on American soil without oversight or authorization. They're creating a template, Mac stated, watching Storm track multiple heat signatures moving with practice coordination. Perfect the process here, then expand to other locations. Use legitimate business operations as cover while building private military infrastructure across the country. Tommy studied the surveillance feeds showing increased activity throughout the valley. The water rights control, the property acquisition, the psychological warfare against the community. It's all part of their operational doctrine. They're not just building facilities, they're testing their methods. Mac's radio crackled with encrypted transmissions between Henderson's teams. The tactical terminology they used revealed their true purpose. This wasn't just security training, but sophisticated military programs designed for large-scale operations. Mac, Sarah's voice carried urgent concern. More equipment arriving at their main compound. These aren't just training supplies anymore. This is full military-grade tactical gear, the kind used for establishing forward operating bases. Through her security feeds, Mac watched Blackstream's teams adjust their positions, creating overlapping fields of control across the entire region. They weren't just containing her farm anymore. They were establishing a militarized zone under the guise of private property security. They think they've contained the situation, Mac noted, feeling Storm's alertness beside her while Ranger and Echo maintained their patrol patterns. Using sophisticated cover operations and political connections to prevent official intervention. But they've made one crucial miscalculation. What's that? Tommy asked, watching more armored vehicles arrive at Henderson's compound. Max smiled grimly, checking her dog's specialized equipment while monitoring Blackstream's deployment patterns. They assumed keeping this quiet was their advantage. Instead, they've given us exactly what we need: documented evidence of unauthorized military operations on American soil, the kind of evidence that even their political connections can't ignore. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as McKee finalized her preparations. Henderson's operation was more sophisticated than anyone had imagined, using legitimate business activities to mask the establishment of private military infrastructure. But 25 years of military experience had taught her that even the most complex operations had vulnerabilities. Storm, Ranger, and Echo maintained their tactical positions, their training allowing them to adapt automatically to the expanded threat assessment. The real question wasn't whether they could expose Henderson's operation. It was whether his teams were prepared to face opponents specifically trained to dismantle covert military installations. The true fight was about to begin, and Mackey had spent her career preparing her dogs for exactly this type of sophisticated engagement. Henderson thought he was establishing a template for future operations. Instead, he was about to learn why veteran K-9 handlers were considered among the most dangerous opponents in dismantling unauthorized military infrastructure. The pre-dawn darkness blanketed Shadow Creek Farm as Mac initiated her coordinated response. Storm, Ranger, and Echo moved with lethal precision through the shadows, their specialized training allowing them to penetrate Blackstream's sophisticated security perimeter without detection. Teams in position, Sarah confirmed through their secured channel. The former MP had coordinated with trusted local law enforcement, positioning them strategically around Henderson's compound. Satellite confirms increased activity at their main facility. They're conducting some kind of nighttime training operation. Mac watched through her thermal imaging as Blackstream's security teams maintained their standard patrol patterns. They were professional, vigilant, but focused on conventional threats. They hadn't considered the possibility of facing dogs specifically trained in covert facility penetration. Remember, Mac instructed through the tactical network, our primary objective is documentation. We need irrefutable evidence of their unauthorized military operations. Storm, initiate surveillance protocol Delta. The lead dog moved like a shadow, his tactical vest containing specialized recording equipment developed through years of military operations. Ranger and Echo automatically adjusted their positions, maintaining perfect coordination while establishing overlapping fields of observation. Multiple training scenarios in progress, Sarah reported, monitoring the thermal feeds. They're running night infiltration drills, using civilian structures as cover. Exactly the kind of unauthorized military training we suspected. Through her tactical scope, Mac observed instructor cadre directing exercises that went far beyond standard security procedures. This was sophisticated military training being conducted without authorization on American soil. Mac, Tommy's voice carried quiet urgency through their communications. More vehicles arriving at their secondary site. These aren't normal construction trucks. They're delivering military-grade training equipment under cover of darkness. Storm suddenly tensed, detecting movement that even Mac's advanced sensors hadn't registered. Seconds later, her systems confirmed his warning. Blackstream had deployed a new type of electronic countermeasure, attempting to disable any surveillance equipment that might document their activities. They're good, Sarah acknowledged, watching the security teams maintain professional discipline despite conducting unauthorized operations, using legitimate training exercises as cover while running their real programs in parallel. Standard military deception protocols. Mac's expression remained focused as she coordinated her dog's movements. 25 years of experience had taught her that even the most sophisticated operations had vulnerabilities. Storm had already penetrated their inner security perimeter, his specialized equipment gathering crucial evidence while avoiding detection. Package secured, Mac announced quietly as Storm transmitted the first set of surveillance data. The dog's training allowed him to document multiple unauthorized training scenarios while maintaining perfect tactical discipline. Ranger, Echo, commence Phase 2. The dogs moved with synchronized precision, implementing a coordinated infiltration that Mac had spent years perfecting. While Storm gathered evidence of the unauthorized training, his siblings penetrated Henderson's command center, documenting the true scope of their operation. Mac, Sarah's voice carried controlled excitement. You need to see this. The data Storm's transmitting. They're not just running unauthorized training. They're establishing a template for converting civilian infrastructure into military installations, using legitimate business operations as cover for systematic militarization. Through her tactical feeds, Mac watched Blackstream's teams continue their exercises, unaware that their security had been completely compromised. Her dogs moved like ghosts through their defenses, their specialized training allowing them to gather critical intelligence while avoiding sophisticated countermeasures. Federal response teams are standing by, Sheriff Patterson confirmed through their secured channel. The moment we have conclusive evidence of unauthorized military operations, they're cleared to move. Storm's growl provided split-second warning, before Mac's systems detected increased electronic warfare signatures. Blackstream was rotating their security teams, implementing more sophisticated patrol patterns. But they had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They're testing advanced urban warfare scenarios, Sarah reported, analyzing the tactical data Storm had transmitted, using the local terrain to simulate civilian population control. This goes beyond unauthorized training. They're preparing for domestic military operations. Mac's tactical mind processed this information while monitoring her dog's movements. Henderson wasn't just establishing a covert training facility. He was creating a blueprint for systematic militarization of civilian areas. Evidence transmission complete, Mac confirmed, as Storm regrouped with his siblings. The dogs had gathered comprehensive documentation of unauthorized military activities, penetrating Blackstream's security without alerting their professional operators. Multiple federal violations confirmed, Sarah announced, reviewing the transmitted data. Unauthorized military training, illegal weapons transfers, sophisticated deception operations using civilian cover. They can't bury this level of evidence. Through her security feeds, Mac watched Blackstream's teams continue their exercises, still unaware that their entire operation had been compromised. Her dogs had penetrated their defenses, documented their activities, and withdrawn without detection, demonstrating why military canine units were considered among the most effective tools in covert operations. Federal response teams moving into position, Sheriff Patterson updated. They're coordinating with state authorities now. Once this evidence is verified, Henderson's entire operation gets shut down. Mac smiled grimly as Storm, Ranger, and Echo resumed their defensive positions. 25 years of military experience had taught her that the most effective operations weren't always about direct confrontation. Sometimes victory came from allowing your opponent to believe they maintained control while systematically documenting their illegal activities. The morning sun began to paint the horizon as Mac prepared for the next phase. Henderson's operation was sophisticated, their cover nearly perfect, but they had never faced opponents specifically trained to penetrate and document covert military installations. The question wasn't whether federal authorities would shut them down. It was whether Henderson would realize how completely his operation had been compromised before it was too late. The morning light revealed an unexpected development at Shadow Creek Farm. Blackstream's teams had withdrawn from their observation posts, apparently abandoning their containment strategy. Storm's behavior confirmed Mac's suspicions. This wasn't a retreat, but a tactical repositioning for something more dangerous. Federal response teams are being delayed, Sarah reported, her voice carrying controlled tension. Henderson's political connections are stronger than we anticipated. They're challenging the evidence, claiming it was obtained illegally through unauthorized surveillance. Mac studied her tactical displays as Rangers signaled another security anomaly. Blackstream had deployed a new type of electronic warfare system, more sophisticated than anything they'd previously encountered. The technology signature suggested military prototype equipment not yet approved for civilian use. Mac, Tommy, burst into the command center, his face pale. Just intercepted communications between Henderson's compound and multiple overseas contacts. They're not just training domestic operators. They're bringing in foreign military contractors under the cover of resort construction workers. Through her thermal imaging, Mac observed unusual movement patterns around Henderson's main facility. The professional precision remained, but there was something different about these operators. Their tactical coordination suggested advanced military training from multiple foreign sources. Sarah, analysis on these new signatures, Mac commanded, watching Storm track the unfamiliar movement patterns. The dog's specialized training allowed him to detect subtle differences in operator behavior that even sophisticated surveillance equipment might miss. Multiple foreign tactical doctrines, Sarah confirmed, studying the data. Russian, Israeli, Chinese. They're combining different military protocols, creating some kind of hybrid training program using techniques that would never be authorized on U.S. soil. Mac's security system suddenly pinged with alerts she'd never seen before. The new electronic warfare equipment was attempting to penetrate her defenses using protocols that shouldn't exist outside classified military programs. They knew we'd document their activities, Mac realized, watching Ranger and Echo adjust automatically to counter the sophisticated electronic attack. They wanted us to gather evidence, to trigger federal response. This whole operation was a setup. Sheriff, Patterson's voice crackled through their backup channel, confirming her fears. Mac, got word from my federal contacts. Henderson's not just some private military contractor. He's running a black program, testing new methods for establishing deniable training facilities in civilian areas. Your farm wasn't just in their way. It was chosen as a live-fire test site. Storm's muscles tensed as Mac processed this information. The implications were staggering. Henderson's operation wasn't just unauthorized. It was an officially sanctioned test program using civilian targets to evaluate new military protocols. They're deploying something new, Sarah warned, monitoring their tactical feeds. Some kind of advanced suppression system designed specifically for military working dogs. Technology we've never seen before. Through her scope, Mac observed Blackstream's teams moving with renewed purpose. Their earlier operations hadn't been meant to succeed. They were gathering data, analyzing responses, preparing for this moment. Mac, Tommy's voice carried urgent concern. More vehicles arriving at Henderson's compound. These aren't just contractors anymore. They're bringing in specialized equipment, things I've never seen before. Mac's tactical mind raced as she assessed the evolving threat. Her dogs were extensively trained, capable of countering most military tactics. But this was something new. A coordinated deployment of experimental technology specifically designed to neutralize their capabilities. They're not trying to hide anymore, Sarah observed, watching multiple teams establish sophisticated firing positions. This was their plan all along. Use our resistance to test their new protocols, evaluate their effectiveness against trained military opposition. Storm's low growl provided split-second warning before Mac's entire security network went dark. The new electronic warfare systems hadn't just disabled her defenses. They had compromised them completely, using technologies that shouldn't exist outside classified military laboratories. Total system failure, Sarah reported, checking. Their backup channels. They're using some kind of targeted electromagnetic pulse, specifically calibrated to disable both electronic systems and neural patterns in trained military dogs. Mac watched Storm struggle to maintain his tactical focus as the advanced suppression systems took effect. Years of training had prepared her dogs for almost anything, but this technology was designed by people who understood exactly how military K9 units operated. They played us perfectly, Mac acknowledged, feeling Storm press against her leg as he fought the effects of the sophisticated suppression field. Used our documentation of their activities to justify deploying experimental military technology in a civilian area, testing their systems against the exact kind of opposition they were designed to counter. Through emergency backup systems, Mac observed more specialized equipment being deployed around her perimeter. Henderson's operation had evolved from simple corporate intimidation into something far more dangerous. A classified military program using civilian targets to evaluate next-generation warfare technologies. What's our move? Tommy asked, watching Blackstream's teams advance with newfound confidence, their experimental equipment systematically neutralizing every defensive advantage Mac had established. Mac smiled grimly, reaching for specialized equipment she'd hoped never to use. 25 years of military operations had taught her to prepare for the impossible. Now we show them why veteran K9 handlers are considered the most dangerous opponents in tactical operations. They think their technology can neutralize military working dogs. Time to demonstrate why you don't underestimate a handler who spent their career preparing for exactly this type of escalation. The morning sun cast harsh shadows as Mac initiated countermeasures she'd developed during her final years of active service. Henderson's operation was more sophisticated than anyone had imagined, using classified military technology against civilian targets. But they had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They assumed their experimental systems could neutralize any military working dog. Instead, they were about to face dogs specifically trained to operate when all technology failed. guided by a handler who had spent decades preparing for worst-case scenarios. The real question wasn't whether they could counter Mac's defenses. It was whether their advanced technology could match the raw, tactical capabilities of properly trained military canine units fighting on their home territory. The advanced suppression systems cast an eerie electronic haze across Shadow Creek Farm as Mac watched her sophisticated defenses fail one by one. Storm struggled to maintain his tactical focus, the experimental technology specifically designed to disrupt the neural patterns of trained military dogs. Ranger and Echo showed similar signs of distress, their years of specialized training battling against equipment created to neutralize their capabilities. Complete communications blackout, Sarah reported, her voice carrying the strain of watching. Their careful preparations systematically dismantled. Their new technology isn't just disrupting our systems, it's turning our own security network against us, using our defensive protocols to map vulnerabilities. Through emergency backup systems, Mac observed Blackstream's teams advancing with methodical precision. Their movement patterns revealed complete confidence in their experimental equipment, knowing it provided unprecedented advantages against military working dogs. Mac, Tommy's voice trembled slightly as he monitored their failing sensors. They're deploying something else, some kind of advanced sonic weapon. The frequency readings, they're exactly calibrated to target trained canine neural responses. Storm's muscles trembled beneath Mac's hand as the sophisticated attack took effect. These weren't standard sonic deterrents that military dogs were trained to resist. This was next-generation technology developed by people who understood exactly how to exploit the enhanced sensory capabilities of specialized military canine units. They're not just testing their equipment, Sarah realized, watching multiple teams establish overlapping fields of suppression. They're documenting everything, using our resistance to gather data, perfect their systems for deployment against other military working dog programs. Mac's tactical mind raced as she assessed their deteriorating situation. Her dogs were among the most extensively trained military canine units in operation, capable of countering almost any conventional threat. But Henderson's classified program had created something new, technologies specifically designed to render their capabilities useless. Total perimeter breach, Sarah announced grimly, as their last defensive line collapsed. They're using our own security measures to create access corridors. The suppression systems are affecting the dog's ability to maintain tactical positions. Through her thermal imaging, Mac watched Blackstream's teams advance with professional efficiency, their experimental equipment systematically eliminating every advantage her years of experience had established. Even Storm, her most experienced dog, struggled to maintain basic patrol patterns under the sophisticated electronic assault. "They've got us trapped," Tommy stated, his young face showing the weight of watching their defenses crumble. "All our preparations, all our training. They developed technology that counters everything." Mac felt Storm press against her leg, fighting to stay focused as the advanced suppression systems intensified. The dog's loyalty and training warred against equipment specifically created to shut down his tactical capabilities. Ranger and Echo showed similar signs of distress, their specialized skills rendered nearly useless by Henderson's classified technology. "Federal response is still blocked," Sarah reported, checking their emergency channels. "Henderson's political connections are using our compromised evidence to justify this deployment, claiming it's a necessary test of critical military technology." Blackstream's teams had established complete tactical superiority, their experimental equipment creating an environment where even highly trained military dogs could barely function. Mac watched Storm struggle to maintain his guard position, years of combat experience fighting against technology designed to exploit his enhanced capabilities. "It's over, Mac," Marcus's voice carried clearly through their compromised communications. "Your dogs are impressive, but this is the future of tactical operations. Next-generation technology specifically designed to neutralize military canine units. Stand down now. Let us complete our evaluation." The morning sun cast harsh shadows across Shadow Creek Farm as Mac faced the darkest moment of her career. Her sophisticated defenses had been systematically dismantled, her dog's capabilities effectively neutralized, her years of tactical experience rendered nearly useless by classified technology she'd never encountered. "They've won," Tommy whispered, watching more specialized equipment being deployed around their position. "All our preparations, everything we tried to protect." They had countermeasures ready for all of it. Mac studied Storm's determined efforts to maintain tactical awareness despite the overwhelming electronic assault. The dog's training and loyalty showed in every struggling movement, fighting against technology specifically designed to shut down his capabilities. Ranger and Echo displayed similar resolution, refusing to abandon their posts even as the sophisticated suppression systems took full effect. "Maybe they have better technology," Mac acknowledged, feeling Storm's unwavering presence beside her despite his obvious distress. "But they've made one crucial mistake in their calculations." "What's that?" Sarah asked, watching Blackstream's teams advance with complete confidence in their experimental equipment. Mac smiled grimly, reaching for specialized gear she'd developed during her final deployment, equipment designed for situations when all technology failed. They assumed their advanced systems could neutralize any military working dog, but 25 years of combat experience teaches you that true tactical capability isn't about technology. It's about the unbreakable bond between a handler and dogs who trust each other completely. The morning light reflected off sophisticated electronic warfare equipment as Mac prepared for what came next. Henderson's classified program had created technology that could defeat any normal military K-9 unit. But they were about to learn why veteran handlers were considered the most dangerous opponents in tactical operations. The real question wasn't whether their advanced systems could neutralize trained military dogs. It was whether they were prepared to face dogs specifically trained to operate when all technology failed, guided by a handler who had spent decades preparing for exactly this type of worst-case scenario. Mac initiated emergency protocols she had developed during her final years of active service. Protocols designed for situations when sophisticated technology made conventional tactical operations impossible. The advanced suppression systems continued, their relentless assault, but Storm's training kicked in as she activated specialized equipment hidden throughout the property. "Implementing zero-tech protocols," Mac announced, her voice carrying quiet authority, as she removed her dog's electronic tactical gear. The sophisticated vests had become a liability, compromised by Henderson's experimental technology. Instead, she equipped them with basic mechanical tools that couldn't be affected by electronic warfare. Sarah observed the transformation with growing understanding. They designed their systems to counter modern military K-9 units, dogs that rely on advanced technology, but they never considered that someone would train dogs to operate without any electronics, Mac finished, watching Storm's posture strengthen as she removed the last of his compromised equipment. 25 years of combat experience teaches you to prepare for every contingency, including complete technological failure. Through their failing tactical feeds, they watched Blackstream's teams advance with absolute confidence in their sophisticated suppression systems. But their movement patterns revealed a critical weakness. They had become completely dependent on their experimental technology. "Mac," Tommy's voice carried renewed hope as he observed the dog's transformation. "Their advanced systems, they're not actually affecting the dogs directly, are they? They're compromising the electronic equipment we use to direct them." "Exactly," Mac confirmed, feeling Storm's muscles relax as he adjusted to operating without technological assistance. They developed countermeasures for modern military working dogs, units that rely on sophisticated tactical gear. But Storm, Ranger, and Echo were trained differently. Sarah studied their thermal imaging one last time before the system failed. Completely. Blackstream's teams are maintaining perfect electronic coverage, but they're leaving physical gaps in their formation. They're so focused on their technology that they've forgotten the basics of tactical operations, Mac finished, watching her dogs respond to simple hand signals that required no electronic enhancement. They assumed their advanced systems made them invulnerable. Time to remind them why military K9 handlers are trained to operate under any conditions. The morning air carried the hum of sophisticated electronic warfare equipment as Mac implemented protocols she had hoped never to need. These weren't the complex tactical maneuvers modern military dogs relied on. They were basic combat techniques, refined through decades of experience. Storm, Ranger, Echo, primary response pattern, Mac commanded softly, using hand signals developed for complete communications blackout scenarios. The dogs moved with renewed purpose, their enhanced capabilities no longer hindered by compromised technology. Through their last functioning security feed, they watched Blackstream's teams maintain their electronic suppression field while advancing toward the farmhouse. Their confidence in their experimental equipment had created a fatal flaw in their tactical awareness. They're not even watching their physical perimeter anymore, Sarah noted, observing their deteriorating situational awareness. All their focus is on maintaining their electronic advantage, basic tactical mistakes that any first-year operator would avoid. Max smiled grimly as Storm led his siblings in executing fundamental military K9 maneuvers that required no technological assistance. The dogs moved like liquid shadow through Blackstream's electronic coverage, exploiting basic vulnerabilities that sophisticated technology had caused their operators to forget. "What we're seeing is the future of tactical operations," Mac explained, watching her dogs systematically expose the weaknesses in Blackstream's reliance on advanced systems. They've developed amazing technology, but they've forgotten that true military capability isn't about having better equipment. It's about maintaining fundamental skills that work under any conditions. The morning sun cast stark shadows as Storm initiated their counteroffensive, moving with practiced precision that owed nothing to sophisticated gear. Blackstream's teams maintained their electronic superiority, unaware that their advanced systems were now irrelevant against dogs. Trained to operate without technological assistance, they're still focused on neutralizing our tactical network, Sarah reported, watching the sophisticated electronic assault continue. Their systems are perfect for disabling modern military K9 units, but against dogs trained to operate using only basic signals. Their technology becomes meaningless, Mac confirmed, feeling Storm's confident presence beside her as Ranger and Echo moved to flank Blackstream's positions. They've created impressive countermeasures for modern warfare, but they never considered facing opponents trained to operate like traditional military working dogs. The transformation in their tactical situation became evident as Mac's dogs executed basic combat maneuvers that required no electronic enhancement. Blackstream's teams maintained their sophisticated suppression field, unaware that their targets had shifted to operating methods their advanced technology couldn't affect. "Showtime," Max stated quietly, watching Storm coordinate with his siblings, using simple signals refined through years of training. "Let's remind them why military K9 handlers spend so much time practicing fundamental techniques that don't rely on modern equipment." The morning light reflected off sophisticated electronic warfare gear as Mac prepared to demonstrate why 25 years of military experience had taught her to maintain basic tactical capabilities alongside modern technology. Henderson's classified program had created impressive countermeasures for contemporary military K9 units, but they were about to learn why veteran handlers trained their dogs to operate effectively even when all technology failed. Storm, Ranger, and Echo moved with renewed confidence, no longer hindered by compromised electronic gear. The real question wasn't whether Blackstream's advanced systems could neutralize modern military working dogs. It was whether their operators were prepared to face dogs specifically trained to function without any technological assistance, guided by a handler who had spent decades perfecting techniques that required nothing more sophisticated than trust and experience. The morning air crackled with electronic warfare signatures as Mac initiated her counteroffensive. Storm moved, like a ghost, through Blackstream's sophisticated security perimeter, exploiting fundamental tactical vulnerabilities their reliance on advanced technology had created. Without compromised electronic gear hindering their movements, the dogs operated with a lethal efficiency that owed nothing to modern equipment. "First team compromised," Sarah reported quietly, watching through old-fashioned binoculars as Storm systematically dismantled Blackstream's careful positioning. They're still focused on maintaining their electronic suppression field, haven't even noticed their physical security is collapsing. Mac observed Ranger and Echo executing perfectly coordinated flanking maneuvers using only basic hand signals. The dogs' movement patterns reflected years of training in fundamental military techniques that required no technological enhancement. Blackstream's teams maintained their sophisticated electronic coverage, unaware that their advanced systems had become irrelevant. "What's happening?" Marcus's voice carried confusion through their compromised communications. "Our sensors show their dogs should be completely neutralized. How are they still operating?" The morning sun cast harsh shadows as Storm demonstrated why military K9 handlers spent so much time practicing basic tactical responses. The dog moved with practiced precision, exploiting gaps in Blackstream's formation that their focus on maintaining electronic superiority had created. Their advanced technology was perfect for disabling modern military working dogs, but useless against units trained to operate without sophisticated gear. "Multiple teams compromised," Sarah confirmed, watching Ranger systematically disable Blackstream's electronic warfare equipment while Echo covered his approach. "They're so dependent on their technology, they've forgotten basic tactical awareness, not even watching their physical perimeter anymore." Through her tactical scope, Mac observed more of Henderson's specialized teams deploying additional suppression systems. Their response to losing physical security was to increase their electronic warfare coverage, demonstrating a fundamental misunderstanding of what they were facing. "Impossible," Marcus snapped, as another team's position was compromised. "Our systems are specifically designed to neutralize military K9 units. Their enhanced capabilities should be completely disabled." "That's your mistake," Mac responded calmly, watching Storm coordinate with his siblings using simple signals refined through years of experience. "You designed countermeasures for modern military dogs, units that rely on advanced technology. But you never considered facing dogs trained to operate without any electronic enhancement." The morning light reflected off sophisticated warfare gear as Blackstream's carefully planned operation began to unravel. Their teams maintained perfect electronic coverage, while Storm, Ranger, and Echo systematically exposed the weaknesses in their tactical positioning. Years of training in fundamental military techniques allowed the dogs to operate effectively despite the advanced suppression systems. "Fall back to defensive positions," Marcus ordered, finally recognizing the threat to his operation. "Concentrate. Electronic coverage. Force them to—" His command cut off as Storm materialized from the shadows, taking down 2 operators before they could adjust their sophisticated equipment. The dogs' movements reflected pure military training, unburdened by compromised technology. Ranger and Echo struck simultaneously from different angles, their coordination requiring nothing more complex than years of practiced experience. "They're adapting," Sarah warned, watching Blackstream's teams attempt to establish basic defensive positions while maintaining their electronic warfare coverage. Finally realizing their technology isn't enough. Mac smiled grimly as Storm led the next phase of their counteroffensive. "Too late. They've forgotten fundamental tactical principles, become completely dependent on their advanced systems. Basic military mistake, relying on technology instead of maintaining core combat." Capabilities. The morning air filled with the sound of disabled equipment as the dogs systematically dismantled Blackstream's electronic warfare network. Their sophisticated technology, designed to neutralize modern military K9 units, proved useless against dogs trained to operate using only fundamental tactical principles. "Shut it down, Marcus," Mac commanded, watching Storm coordinate another perfectly executed maneuver. "Your classified program created impressive countermeasures for contemporary military working dogs, but you never considered why veteran handlers insist on maintaining basic tactical capabilities alongside modern technology." Blackstream's teams attempted to establish conventional defensive positions, but years of relying on advanced systems had eroded their fundamental tactical awareness. Storm, Ranger, and Echo moved like liquid shadow through their formations, exploiting basic vulnerabilities that no amount of sophisticated technology could compensate for. "This is impossible," Marcus insisted, watching his careful operation. Collapse. "Our systems are perfect, the most advanced military technology ever developed for countering K9 units." "That's exactly why you failed," Mac replied, feeling Storm's confident presence beside her as his siblings continued their systematic dismantling of Blackstream's positions. "You focused on creating better technology instead of understanding what makes military working dogs truly effective. It's not about sophisticated equipment. It's about the unbreakable bond between a handler and dogs trained to operate under any conditions." The morning sun rose fully as Mac's counteroffensive reached its culmination. Henderson's classified program had developed impressive countermeasures for modern military K9 units, but they had never considered facing dogs specifically trained to function without technological assistance. The real victory wasn't just in defeating their advanced systems, it was in demonstrating why fundamental military principles would always trump over-reliance on sophisticated equipment. Storm, Ranger, and Echo maintained their coordinated assault, their movements reflecting years of training in basic tactical techniques that required nothing more complex than trust and experience. The question wasn't whether Blackstream's technology could disable modern military working dogs. It was whether their operators could adapt to facing opponents who had never forgotten the fundamental principles of tactical operations. The aftermath of Mac's counteroffensive transformed Shadow Creek Farm into a stark demonstration of fundamental military principles prevailing over advanced technology. Blackstream's sophisticated electronic warfare equipment lay disabled across the property, while their operators found themselves systematically contained by 3 dogs operating with nothing more complex than basic tactical training. "Federal response teams are inbound," Sarah reported, monitoring emergency channels that had suddenly cleared of interference. Henderson's political connections went silent the moment their classified program failed. Apparently, nobody wants to be associated with unauthorized military technology testing on American soil. Mac watched Storm maintain his defensive position, while Ranger and Echo secured the remaining Blackstream operators. The dogs' movements reflected pure military discipline, their effectiveness enhanced rather than hindered by the absence of sophisticated gear. Through her tactical scope, she observed Marcus coordinating with his remaining teams, their advanced systems now serving only to document their complete tactical failure. "It's over," Mac announced through their compromised communications network. "Your classified program proved one thing, that sophisticated technology can never replace fundamental tactical capabilities. Time to stand down before this gets worse." The morning sun illuminated the full extent of Blackstream's operational collapse. Their teams had maintained perfect electronic warfare coverage until the very end, never realizing that their reliance on advanced technology had created fatal vulnerabilities in basic tactical awareness. "You don't understand what you've done," Marcus responded, his voice carrying both frustration and grudging respect. This wasn't just about testing new military technology. The program was meant to establish complete tactical superiority over any K9 unit worldwide. "Do you know how many governments were waiting for proof our systems worked?" Sarah's expression hardened as she processed this revelation. They weren't just building a private military training facility. They were creating a showcase for selling advanced anti-K9 technology to foreign powers, using American soil to test systems designed to neutralize military working dogs globally. Through her tactical feeds, Mac observed multiple vehicles approaching from the direction of Henderson's compound. Not reinforcements this time, but officials responding to the now undeniable evidence of unauthorized military operations on civilian territory. "Your mistake wasn't just tactical," Mac stated, watching Storm coordinate with his siblings to maintain control of their captured operators. "You focused so much on creating better technology that you forgot why military K9 units are effective in the first place. It was never about sophisticated equipment. It was about the unbreakable bond between handlers and dogs, trained to operate under any conditions. The morning air carried the sound of approaching helicopters as federal response teams moved to secure the area. Blackstream's remaining operators maintained their positions, their advanced technology now serving only to document their complete tactical failure for multiple government agencies. Secondary facilities are being secured, Sarah reported, monitoring emergency channels. State police just arrested Henderson at his compound, found complete documentation of their classified program, including contracts for selling their anti-K9 technology to foreign military organizations. Mac observed Storm's continued disciplined behavior as federal tactical teams began arriving. The dog's movements reflected years of fundamental military training that required nothing more sophisticated than trust and experience. Ranger and Gay. Echo maintained equally professional control over their sectors, demonstrating why veteran handlers insisted on preserving basic tactical capabilities alongside modern technology. "You've exposed classified military technology testing," Marcus noted, watching more federal units arrive. "Created an international incident involving multiple foreign powers. Made powerful enemies today." "No," Mac corrected, feeling Storm's steady presence beside her. "We exposed unauthorized military operations on American soil, prevented the sale of classified technology to foreign powers, protected fundamental K9 tactical capabilities from being compromised. That's what 25 saw. Years of military experience teaches you the difference between following orders and doing what's right." The morning sun rose fully as federal response teams secured the area. Henderson's classified program had developed impressive countermeasures for modern military working dogs, but they had never considered the implications of facing a veteran handler who understood that true tactical capability went beyond sophisticated technology. "Ma'am," a senior federal officer approached, his credentials marking him as part of a specialized oversight unit. "We'll need complete documentation of everything that occurred here. Multiple agencies are involved now, given the unauthorized testing of classified military technology on civilian targets." Mac watched Storm maintain his professional bearing as more tactical teams arrived. The dog's discipline reflected years of training that focused on fundamental military principles rather than relying on advanced equipment. Ranger and Echo displayed similar poise, their effectiveness enhanced rather than diminished by operating without technological assistance. "The documentation's comprehensive," Mac confirmed, noting how Blackstream's sophisticated systems had recorded their own tactical failures. "Your teams will find everything they need to understand why testing classified military technology against civilian targets was a serious miscalculation." Sarah coordinated with arriving federal units while Mac observed the systematic securing of Henderson's operation. The implications went beyond exposing unauthorized military activities. They had demonstrated why fundamental tactical principles would always triumph over reliance on advanced technology. "They'll try to bury this," Sarah noted quietly, watching. Multiple agencies begin processing the scene. Classified programs, foreign military contracts, unauthorized technology testing on American soil. There are powerful people who won't want this exposed. Mac smiled grimly, feeling Storm's unwavering presence beside her as federal teams continued arriving. They can try, but 25 years of military experience teaches you something crucial. The truth has a way of prevailing, especially when it's documented by the very technology meant to suppress it. The morning light reflected off sophisticated electronic warfare equipment, now serving as evidence in multiple federal investigations. Henderson's classified program had sought to revolutionize military K9 operations through advanced technology. Instead, they had provided perfect documentation of why fundamental tactical capabilities would always remain the true foundation of effective military working dog operations. 1 month after Henderson's classified program was exposed, Shadow Creek Farm stood as a testament to fundamental military principles prevailing over advanced technology. The morning sun painted familiar patterns across the property as Mac conducted her daily security check, Storm moving with practiced precision beside her, while Ranger and Echo maintained their standard patrol patterns. Federal investigations, had revealed the full scope of Henderson's operation. Multiple foreign governments had invested in his classified anti-canine technology program, seeing it as a way to neutralize military working dog units worldwide. The unauthorized testing on American soil had created diplomatic incidents that would take years to fully resolve. Latest update from Washington, Sarah reported, joining Mac on her morning rounds. 3 more senior officials resigned over their involvement in authorizing Henderson's program. Seems nobody wants to explain why they approved testing classified military technology against civilian targets. Mac watched Storm adjust his patrol pattern to acknowledge Sarah's presence, his movements reflecting pure tactical discipline that required no technological enhancement. Through her restored security feeds, she observed similar professional behavior from Ranger and Echo. The dogs had maintained their fundamental capabilities even as modern equipment was gradually reintegrated into their operations. The community's healing, Tommy added, approaching with the morning's maintenance reports. Henderson's development plans have been completely dismantled. The water rights have been returned to their rightful owners. Even got word that the Weber family is rebuilding their farm. The morning air carried familiar agricultural scents as Mac surveyed her property. Blackstream's sophisticated electronic warfare equipment had been removed weeks ago, but the lessons from their confrontation remained. Their over-reliance on advanced technology had demonstrated why veteran handlers insisted on maintaining fundamental tactical capabilities. More inquiries coming in from military K-9 programs worldwide, Sarah noted, reviewing recent communications. They're all interested in how basic tactical training prevailed over sophisticated electronic warfare systems. Your protocols for maintaining fundamental capabilities alongside modern technology are becoming standard doctrine. Mac smiled slightly, feeling Storm's steady presence beside her. The dog's disciplined behavior reflected years of training focused on core military principles rather than depending on advanced equipment. Ranger and Echo displayed similar professional bearing, their effectiveness enhanced by understanding that true tactical capability went beyond sophisticated gear. The Congressional Oversight Committee wants you to testify, Sarah continued. They're reviewing all classified programs involving military working dogs. Your experience demonstrating why fundamental training trumps over-reliance on technology has sparked serious policy discussions. Through her tactical scope, Mac observed normal agricultural activity resuming across the valley. Henderson's unauthorized military operation had sought to revolutionize K-9 tactical response through advanced technology. Instead, they had provided perfect documentation of why basic military principles remained crucial to effective operations. More veteran handlers are speaking up, Tommy reported, his young face showing pride in being part of something larger. Sharing similar experiences about maintaining fundamental capabilities. Your stand against classified technology testing has inspired others to defend traditional K-9 training protocols. The morning sun rose fully as Mac completed her security check. Storm, Ranger, and Echo maintained their professional discipline, demonstrating why 25 years of military experience had taught her to value basic tactical principles above sophisticated equipment. Their victory over Henderson's advanced technology had implications far beyond one farm in Montana. They're still trying to understand how you did it, Sarah noted, watching the dogs execute their patrol patterns with perfect coordination. How 3 military dogs operating without modern equipment defeated the most sophisticated electronic warfare systems ever developed. Mac scratched Storm behind his ears, rewarding his continued professional behavior while observing Ranger and Echo maintain their sectors. Because they focused on creating better technology instead of understanding what makes military working dogs truly effective. It was never about advanced equipment. It was about the unbreakable bond between handlers and dogs trained to operate under any conditions. The morning light reflected off restored security systems as Mac considered the broader impact of their stand against unauthorized military technology testing. Henderson's classified program had sought to revolutionize tactical operations through sophisticated electronic warfare. Instead, they had reminded the world why fundamental military Principles would always remain essential to effective canine operations. The legacy goes beyond exposing one classified program, Sarah observed, watching Storm coordinate seamlessly with his siblings. You've demonstrated why veteran handlers insist on preserving basic tactical capabilities alongside modern technology. Showed why the foundation of effective military working dog operations will always be training and trust, rather than sophisticated equipment. Mac smiled, feeling the reassuring presence of her dogs as they continued their morning patrol. Shadow Creek Farm had become more than just her retirement project. It was now a symbol of why fundamental military principles would always triumph over reliance on advanced technology. Sometimes the most important victories aren't about having better equipment, Mac stated, watching Storm maintain his professional bearing while Ranger and Echo secured their sectors. They're about remembering why military working dogs became such effective tactical assets in the first place. The unbreakable bond between handlers and dogs who trust each other completely, trained to operate effectively under any conditions. The morning sun cast familiar shadows across Shadow Creek Farm as Mac completed her rounds. The sophisticated technology that had threatened their way of life was gone, but the lessons remained. Henderson's classified program had sought to revolutionize military canine operations through advanced electronic warfare. Instead, they had provided perfect documentation of why fundamental tactical capabilities would always remain the true foundation of effective military working dog operations. Storm, Ranger, and Echo continued their patrol, their movements reflecting years of training focused on basic military principles rather than relying on sophisticated equipment. They had faced the most advanced technology ever developed for neutralizing military working dogs and prevailed through nothing more complex than trust, experience, and unwavering commitment to fundamental tactical capabilities. The true victory wasn't just in defeating unauthorized military technology testing. It was in demonstrating why veteran handlers would always insist on maintaining basic tactical principles alongside modern equipment. Because sometimes the most crucial battles aren't won through sophisticated technology, but through the unbreakable bond between a handler and dogs, trained to operate effectively under any conditions. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.